Good evening. It's lovely to see you all here. It's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Dr. Leanne Chesterfield, Director of the Harn Museum of Art, to this evening's program. The lecture is part of the Harn Eminent Scholar Chair in Art History series, the HESCA series we call it, and you'll see that on the screen as it rotates by, because we still have a couple of events coming up in the course of the semester with HESCA. HESCA is presented by the University of Florida's School of Art and Art History, and the talks are organized by the HESCA Committee in cooperation with the Harn Museum of Art. It's really a delight for us to work closely with the school on this program. Established by a gift by Dr. David A. and Marianne Coffrin, the lecture series presents eminent scholars, art historians, critics, curators, and museum professionals in talks here at the University of Florida to enrich our experience of art from multiple dimensions. HESCA's been a very important vehicle for the Harn to feel that it's able to work more closely with the School of Art and Art History, and we're delighted that tonight's lecture continues that, that tradition. Our speaker tonight will be introduced by Guolong Lai, Associate Professor of Art and Archaeology in the School of Art and Art History here. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lai.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Eric. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Guolong Lai. I'm Associate Professor of Chinese Art and Archaeology at the university. So welcome to the second HESCA lecture on Chinese art this semester. This spring semester, we have a feast of Chinese art exhibitions and lectures on campus. So last night, Professor Julia Andrews delivered an excellent lecture on women artists in modern China. And Tong Yun already announced that we have a double feature for this program. So today is my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Professor Kuiyi Shen. Professor Shen is a professor of Asian art history, theory, and criticism in UCSD. And he's a native of Shanghai. Professor Shen is one of the generation of the Chinese youth who went to the mountains and down to the countryside, the Chinese saying. And that was the urban youth was sent to the countryside during the Cultural Revolution. But after the Cultural Revolution, he went to the Shanghai Normal University and received a BA in fine arts. Professor Shen was trained as a painter. He actually exhibited his work in China, and he told me yesterday the last exhibition was in Japan. So he's a practicing artist, oil painter. So after several years of as an art journal editor, he came to the United States to study art history and received the MA and a PhD from Ohio State University. After that, he taught at Ohio University, SUNY Buffalo, Rice University, University of Oregon before joining the UCSD. His teaching and research focus on modern and contemporary Chinese art and Japanese art and Sino-Japanese artistic exchanges in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Professor Shen is an author and co-authored many books and exhibition catalogs and scholarly articles. In particular, I want to mention this book. Actually, I brought my copy today. I asked them for autograph because both author is here today. So this book was published 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, and I used it in my class. I teach, although I'm a specialist in ancient Chinese art and archaeology, but I enjoy all my knowledge that a student learn from me or we learn together is from this book. It's an excellent book. I think the study of modern and contemporary Chinese art is very difficult because the overwhelming of the material. Because it's a very contrast with the period I'm studying, like the ancient China, from archaeological material. many of our arguments are, hanging on one piece of evidence. But for them, for the modern and contemporary Chinese art, there's lots of material and how to sort through all this material. And another additional problem is in China, many of the archives are not accessible, are not open. So you can hear lots of things, from people's memoir, but it's very difficult to verify. You don't have archive research. So I think it's the only book on modern and contemporary Chinese art. There's no second one yet. So I also want to mention that Professor Shen is not only an excellent scholar, an artist, and art historian, he also a gourmet cook. I still remember many years ago, I had the fortune to attend one of Professor Shen's legendary, his student told me, legendary Chinese New Year dinner party that he held for colleagues and students in his home. It's truly memorable. So I don't know what we can offer in Gainesville, probably gated tail or something like that. So today I'm very happy that I can welcome him here in Florida. And his topic today is calligraphic language in contemporary Chinese art. Calligraphy is a favorite topic of many of our colleagues and students, particularly the unique aspect of Chinese art. So without further ado, please join me. Welcome, Professor Shen.
Thank you so much, Professor Lai. Such a nice introduction. And also I want to thank the Dr. Tony Yin and also Dr. Eric and also the Mike of the Harn Museum of Art, and also thanks the Haskell lecture series. Today, my talk, I think Dr. Lai has already given the title of my talk, is Calligraphic Language in the Contemporary Chinese Art. As we know, in China, calligraphy, it's okay.
Sorry, this is just a funny reflection from my table.
Okay.
On your screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me from the back? Okay. As you know, in China, calligraphy has its long history, and calligraphy found its place in contemporary Chinese art, however, is during the modernist art movement in the 1980s. Indebted to its ideographic capability, there were two ways for the calligraphy to penetrate the contemporary Chinese art world. Some artists focused on the graphic and also the abstract features in the art shades and also brush strokes, while the other groups introduced the calligraphic language and also explore the character itself in their artworks. The groundbreaking the modern calligraphy exhibition at the National Art Museum of China in 1985 showcased the creative outputs of the artists who intended to experiment with the calligraphy in a modernist manner. They are clearly influenced by the heated discussion with the calligraphy in the modernist manner. And they were clearly, of course, at that time, they were also influenced by the heated discussion of the modernist painting among the domestic artists. Other inevitable reference possibly include the few character currents led by the modern Japanese calligrapher, such as Teshima Yuki and Inoue the Yuichi, and other kind of avant-garde the calligraphic kind of practice. When the artists were occupied with this kind of the ideas, such as the calligraphy entering the painting, painting entering calligraphy, or painting and calligraphy shared the same roots. People's conception of the calligraphy and the modern art was fundamentally inadequate. In fact, as early as calligraphy was born out of writing, it transcended the functional ideographs and also became a form of art. Calligraphy is called shufa in China and shodo in Japan, and also soye in Korea. So this fa, dao, and ye all makes it clear the calligraphy goes beyond the ideographic writings, and it has its own system, the formal, principle, and the standardized aesthetics. Chinese writing system has been pictographic from the very beginning, so it is descriptive and also good at the presenting. Since the different ways of writing were categorized aesthetically and stylistically into the different styles and schools, regardless of the textual contents, the relationship between calligraphy and painting has become more intertwined and also complicated. As the art of the calligraphy was introduced into painting, it changes the Chinese Tang and the Song Dynasty painting and built the foundation for the literary tradition. But we should realize this process not as a historical necessity, it was a conscious choice. It not only changed the developmental path of the Chinese painting, but also invoked people's consciousness of graphic potential embedded in calligraphy. During the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century, the superiority of the study school, Beishi, over the copybook school, Tieshi, among the intellectuals, together with the rise of the epigraphic taste in the painting, led to the heightened awareness of the calligraphy and painting shared the same root, this kind of concept. In fact, back to the late 19th century, Wu Changshi, the artist one of the leading artists in the Shanghai school, his slow and irregular, yet the firmly executed character in his stone drum inscription could become the artist's unique contribution to the abstract aesthetics in the art of the calligraphy. In the composition of Wu's work, the ideographic function has been replaced by the abstract compositional structures and the delightful brushworks. As scholar Lin Yutang pointed out, I quote, "So fundamental is the place of calligraphy in Chinese art as a study of form and a rhythm in the abstract that we may say it has provided the Chinese people with the basic aesthetics, and it's through the calligraphy the Chinese have learned their basic notions of line and form." End quote. Among the active experimentals of the 1980s, there were a group of the young artists. They would receive the systematic and professional art education, focusing on their attention on creating the pseudo characters with the calligraphic strokes and also the compositional structures. Their main purpose was to define the essence of the calligraphy as the line and form, not the content and the information. Participants including the Bai Qiansheng, Gu Wenda, and also the Wu Sanzhuan, and the Gu Gan, Zhu Qingsheng, Xu Bing, Zhuang Tianming, and Qiu Zijie, and many others. Their pursuit was a very fundamental turning point and a starting point for modern calligraphy in mainland China, which urges the modern calligraphy to explore and rethink about the nature of the calligraphy as the form of art. Furthermore, it could encouraging people to question and overthrow the established cultural connotation of calligraphy, which would result in the type of the modernist art involve the use of the calligraphic language. Many artists are trying to reform, revise, and recompose the traditional writing system in hope that they could push the boundary of the meaning of and the format. The writing system is concentrated on sign in the Chinese traditional culture. It has endless plasticity in terms of the formal structure and of the meaning making. Such plasticity first comes from its abstract structure that is also the pictographic. The Chinese keeps and also develops the art of writing, calligraphy, not because of the pictograph, but for its ideogram. Each character is a representative of the ideographic writing system. During the formation of the process, the character was standardized with the unchangeable basic structure. Consequently, its structure and the ideogram are the two challenges for the contemporary Chinese artists who intended to bring the words and the writing into their work. From the late 1980s to the early 1990s, the single most captivating myth of the modernizing calligraphy has lost its attraction. Artists started to using writing and the characters as the resource for their creativity and paying the greater attention to the artistic concept, artistic language, as well as the new materials and also media. Taiwanese artist Dong Yangzi's writing does not deconstruct the character, but emphasize the unity of the words and the calligraphy, and trying to reconstruct the cultural space between the calligraphy and the Chinese classical tradition. The Guwenda introduced the pseudo characters into the traditional ink painting, such as this in his pseudo character series, in which the ordinary characters are deconstructed and leaving the calligraphic strokes unchanged, but the radical and the components dissolved. By doing so, Guwenda makes the pseudo and the upside-down characters. The pseudo characters enjoyed this greater kind of formal flexibility. Concurrently, the unusual combination of the character further blocks the thinking process to decipher and thus generated a new kind of meaning. One of the Xu Bing's the early work, Book from Heaven, challenges the ideographic nature of the characters. He deconstructs many original meaningful characters and reconstructs it with new characters without any meaning. In his installation work, we see the repetitive, the meaningless labor resulted in the unreadable pseudo-Chinese characters displayed from the ceiling to the floor. It questions and satirizes the function of the Chinese writing, which has been passing on culture and cultural traditions for thousands of years. Instead of conveying the real semantic meaning, the characters merely designate and also become the multiplication of the designator. Artists like the Guwenda and the Xu Bing actually emphasize the eligibility of the characters, which naturally took part of the nationwide cultural discourse. In the cultural medium at that time, their practice has a strong connotation of the political propaganda, and thus attracted the attention and the discussion beyond the art. Today, the calligraphy-related art works has become an important component in the contemporary art. These works can be categorized into a few groups. The first group can be traced back to the traditional calligraphy, but the artists trying to employ the modern concepts and also methodologies. The second group is to add the calligraphic elements into the other kind of visual art forms. These two kind of groups basically explore the use of the representation of the calligraphy language and the elements. The third group introduced the Chinese writing system or the structure of the characters to conceptual art, and including the new media of the art. On the feeling of the conventionalization in traditional calligraphy, the Qiu Zhenzhong actually insists in his this theory of the transformative spatial concept, which means by the fragmenting the structure of the single character, which is also the spatial structure, and define the smallest grid as a unit, we constructed our spatial kind of experience in relation to the artwork. In his the 4 series, New Poetry series, the Word series, Signatures, and also characters to deciphers, Qiu Zijie trying to make the calligraphy a pure form of the visual art and the behavior of the manner, and also negate the conventionalization in terms of form and the contents. Wang Dongling, here you can on the screen, he ran his running kind of script with experimental arrangement of the stroke and the composition, extended the discourse of the abstractness. In order to innovate the new calligraphic forms that carry the modernist awareness, the artist consider the momentum and the rhythm of the lines, the density of the dryness and the slate, you can see here, as well as the principle of the composition as the part of the complete work. Doubtlessly, this American abstract expressionist and as a characterographic art by the modern Japanese calligrapher, such as the Teshima Yuki and also the Inoue Yuichi, shaded the light on the Wang Dongling's practice. This kind of the impact also can be found in the other artists. Here I'm showing the Yuichi is the performing kind of calligraphy, and also we can see the Wang Dongling actually doing almost the same kind of the performance too. This kind of the impact also can be found in the other artists like the Yang Binghui's work. You can see, where Yuichi, the influence also obviously can find in the Yang Binghui's work. The artists who tried to incorporate the calligraphic language into their artworks, such as Zhang Dawo, who abandoned this legible kind of meaningful Chinese characters, aligned in the regular columns, but he cannot distance himself from the true sense of the excitement and even the thrill through the spontaneous writing. Possibly influenced by Japanese calligrapher Morita Shiro. His work actually strictly avoided to be retouched and also reflected some characteristics in the traditional running script, including the composition produced when the brush is moved rapidly and continuously across the paper. Zhang Dao shows this distinctive kind of sensibility of the motion and the mobility in brushstrokes, and skillfully makes the traditional brushwork and the modernist compositional idea intangible. And the works simultaneously satisfy the people's preference for the original pictorial compositions that indicate the modernist awareness of, and also evoke the people's nostalgia for the tradition. Artist Chen Guangwu attacked the traditional models in the writing calligraphy. He extracted the basic strokes from the single complete characters and reduced them to the basic strokes of the radicals and freely changed the shapes. Every work of Chen Guangwu contains one single character, and also or the radicals in his duplications. His here you can see he claimed his work is to decompose the readability and also the readability of the character while writing this. And also the result, the presence of the art, of the strokes, and also his own kind of the cultivation in his work. Li Huashen, the shown on the screen, you can see here, his kind of rigged painting, great painting actually constitutes the phenomenological record of his life. He was inspired by lines of the Chinese monks when he visited the various Tibetan Buddhist monastery in 1990s. He was inspired by the lines of the chanting monks. Like the chanting monks, the construction of the great in his painting involved a deeply kind of the meditative process. Each line required the patience and the emptiness, repeated until the ground was filled. The vivacious of the Li Huashen was also often we can see able to point to the section of the particular grid and record events and the occurring as he reached that part of the painting. Luo Qi and the artist's painting showing on screen, you can see used the symbols, icons, and characters and the words. No matter they are the classical, the modern, the Western, or the Asian, or all conveying his kind of feeling to the family, society, nature, and also the individuals. During the 1990s, the conceptual art, including the new media art that used the writing or the structure of the Chinese characters, flooded into the contemporary the art space. This signified the modern calligraphy, had joined the realm of the postmodernist art in the terms of the both concept and the practice. The artists, the older generation artists, so actually the diaspora, the artist, the C.C. Wang, and he passed away several years ago. In his work, we can see, this is the two works on the screen. You can see the C.C. Wang actually distanced himself from the conventional brushwork, focusing instead on the formal kind of the elements of the calligraphic brush strokes. In the work on the left, C.C. Wang used the flat-tipped Western-style sponge brush to render the abstract characters that appeared to evoke from the seal script calligraphy. Moreover, however, between the legibility and the nonsense, the forms in this work read as the calligraphic, even though they do not actually produce the poetic contents and all resemble the stylistic models. In the work on the right, the C.C. Wang actually pushed the abstraction of the calligraphic lines even further. Layering the ink lines, he built a composition of the intersection of the geometric shapes of the art at the first glance may seem akin to the painting style of the Western contemporary, such as the Franz Klein and the Mark Tobey. However, for Wang, this experiment in abstraction was grounded in his exploration of the limits of the calligraphy lines. A practice actually is once built upon the tradition and broke from it. The group of the artists actually advocated the contemporary calligraphy is actually the non-kind of calligraphy and anti-calligraphy and the decalligraphy. We see here the Wang Danming and and also one of his colleagues together held the Chinese Contemporary Calligraphy exhibition in Shanghai in 1991. At this exhibition, Wang Nanming brought his kind of ideas that broke the links between the traditional calligraphy and push it and the Chinese traditional calligraphy and also the Chinese culture into the radical way. He advocates this kind of contemporary calligraphy is actually the non-calligraphy, anti-calligraphy, or the de-calligraphy. Combination, his work called Combination, the Ball of the Characters, in 1992 reflected the artist's changing kind of opinion. Wang first finished the work of the running script on the full-size rice paper and scratched the paper into the balls and placed them in the construction site or in the unfinished building. The calligraphy lost its normal form and legibility. And the broken calligraphic lines became the abstract images on the spheres. This work characterized and also negates the traditional practice of calligraphy, leaves the audience in shock as the artist repeats this kind of meaningless label and also provoked their thoughts on the sustainability of the traditional cultural signs. At almost the same time, Zhang Qiang started to launch his performance installation project. Zhang Qiang's traceology, there's a report, the title he gives, involved this cooperation individually with the young women of the different race, identity, professionals, and nationalities. The woman would always decide that the type of the brush, size of paper, and the amount of the ink to be used. As she began to move the paper, Zhang Qiang would start writing the sentence of the real characters. Each time, the interaction between the male and the female left the trace of the broken brushworks, which together with the documented archives from the site of the art making, became the final artworks. His project deconstructs the writing of the Chinese characters, questions the calligraphic practice, and skillfully adds the concepts of feminism into the work. The artist intended to encourage the viewers to think about the essence of the calligraphy. The performance actually of the Zhang Qiang, the Wang Nanming, actually pushed the calligraphy into a realm of the conceptual art, which broadened the originally sectional role of the calligraphy in the community, the participation, and also the cultural construction. Such social construction in the field of the visual culture can also be seen in the other works, like Qiu Zijie's work. In this work, entitled "The Copying the Orchid Pavilion Practice of the Southern Times," creates by actually artists making this by copying the text repetitively, but always on the same the piece of the paper. As he layered the words dissolved into the solid field of the black ink, a reversed cultural icon was repatriated and also the obliterated. It is another kind of the typical kind of works of the time, and tackles the cultural kind of the innation in art. Similar works also we can find in the Song Dong's the work, the water diary. He used water right on the piece of the stone and repeatedly write it, and also the words after the water dried, just dissolved. The text is dissolved. And the woman artist Wang Gongyi, an artist now lived in and works lives and works in Portland, Oregon. In her work, you can see here is called this work in the series work called Chaos. this piece is called the Two Clouds. Almost all the words are pictures and patterns. They are completely illegible, and some words are smudged with the thick ink as if they are caked with mud. A few words look like the lumps of the blood or wounds. But the text is actually cut from the Buddhist scripture on the logical, the Dunhuang, the manuscript. In the logical arguments, rationality, causality, and clarity are the most important kind of concerns. But here, the piece of calligraphic work, however, became the kind of the anti-thesis of the aesthetics. The words are converted to the shapes. The wisdom is based on the anti-wisdom, and the rationality is reversed to the irrationality. Another work shown here is also in the same series is we can see the bottom of the composition is a large area of the sprayed ink. The movement of the sprayed creates the subtle kind of the organic yet the vigorous kind of patterns. It resembles the depths of the bottomless the earth, filled with the billions of the hovering kind of sparks. The white above is the boundless sky. The composition is a strong contrast, black and white, yin and yang, movement and stillness. In the middle of the white area, we see the paragraph of the Chinese calligraphy is suspended between the two realms. The words are the symbol of the civilization and the illusion of the order. And the composition is an artistic kind of statement of the human civilization in relationship to the primordial the forces, a visual antithesis of order and chaos. The artist Wang Tiande, the Shanghainese artist, in his recent project, replaced the brush with cigarettes or the incense burner to write this kind of the characters on the paper or silk. In his work, each panel consists of two sheets of the paper laid one top on the other. The bottom sheet is inscribed with the copies of classical masterpieces. The top sheet was made of the translucent paper into which the characters have been burned with the cigarette or incense sticks. The result turns to be like the ink rubbings from the ancient stone and the engravings. However, the artist, the great kind of skills in calligraphy is reflected in the calligraphic composition and the rhythm between the strokes, as well as his sophisticated use of the brush. This brush actually is not brush, is the incense sticks or the cigarettes. Xu Bing, we introduced his work before. He seems to never kind of separate the words from the images, but he kept kind of the pushing his own kind of boundaries and also challenge the ordinary the mindset of the viewers. In his the reading landscapes, this artist actually goes so far to translate the landscapes into characters, turning the landscape painting into the kind of the glyphs. He employs the character of the mountains, stone, and also the grass, wood, water, earth, and the birds to the represent of the whole characters. Here on the painting is all the characters right here. Here like the stone, and this is the soil and the earth, and also right the grass. Here the grass here, and some tree, and here is the mountain. They are all the Chinese characters. Actually, he write the characters when he saw this the image. Actually, this work start from 1998 when he participated in one project with the UNESCO in Nepal. when the artist is asked to create work, responded to the what is seen in this culture, he sit on the side of the mountain. Then, based on his observation, he write everything he's seen on the paper. Then he later find this actually composed the landscape painting here. He claims actually Chinese literary artists were proud of this synchronization of poem and the calligraphy and the painting. So I try to make all three things into one. You can argue that it is a piece of the calligraphy, or painting, or text. Brush and ink can become a game. So Xu actually, we know the famous as play the game, challenge people's conception. This is also Xu work you can see here, and also he later, this is also his this kind of writing landscapes. And later he even turns this into the three-dimensional kind of the form and makes the installation. Also use the same. This is the Chinese character of water, and this is the Chinese ancient character of the fish. This is all the grass. Grass here is the road, and it is a stone and a mountain, and this is also the leaves of the trees. All these writing and to make the three-dimensional characters to form this installation works. And he actually this work is the piece of the painting by the Qing dynasty, the 18th century Chinese artist paintings here, 17th century Chinese artist paintings here. He expanded the composition with his the writing the characters to form this this three-dimensional installation landscapes. The Xu also, you can see that from his work, the early work, actually the character without a meaning, but the later, actually every puts the meaning back to his art. This is quite interesting, kind of the challenging himself too. In the exhibition, that's called the Ink Dreams, selection from the foundation of the ink collection. Last year, actually showing in the LACMA in Los Angeles, the curator kind of Susanna Ferrer introduced a group of the international artists. They're working on these concepts. In the Dai Guangyu, in the exhibition, they're showing this Dai Guangyu's work, actually landscape, the thick kind of opaque ink cut into the ice pond, and reading the mountains and waters. The sun and the sui, this is actually this term Chinese used as indicate the landscapes. Instead, distant mountains suddenly fingering the composition from the above. The water too is represented by the slab of the ice, which simultaneously figured as canvas. Reflection of the clouds evident particularly in the second panel of the depiction. Added another dimension to the lyrical kind of playfulness between the concrete and also figurative landscape. The tension between the first and the second panel, left and the right respectively, is telling how the nature, forces, and the dimension of the time becomes the active participants in the creative process. The artist Anthony Pesch was born in the Budapest and also immigrated with his family to Paris when he was 5. From 1970 to his death, he lived and worked in Montreal. He was very creative as the painter and as printmaker, and also known as a poet. The work shown here, entitled, represents the imaginary. The alphabet suggests the cuneiform, and all this esoteric kind of music score. In the writing of the artistic text, this is a considerable variation in the symbols of the size and also forces ways with which they are etched in the metal printing plates. Even the characters' individual kind of structure varied enormously. Some the work that combines the elegant kind of forms and also with kind of informality and of the handwriting letters. Artist Cha A.K. and might be one of the most successful ink painters in Singapore. This work's reflection breeze passes by the Lotus Pond is a representative work of his well-known series of the Lotus Pond. The early works in the series showcase the 写意, or the Chinese term. It means express the script style of the Chinese ink painting, exploring the spiritual kind of essence through the loose brushwork and aggressive forms. But the flowers and leaves are still clearly descendable as such. Later, the lotus was reduced to the broken branch and the dried leaves of the late autumn. From there, the chart actually developed the minimal style with the flattened composition, purely abstract forms, and expressive lines, as shown in this painting. As if some gibberish kind of recorded in the illegible kind of calligraphy, it is executed with the agitated and also the forceful brushwork, with the only essence of the remaining of this painting conceptually illuminated the vitality of the lotus. The Korean artist Kim Ho-dae, here in his painting San, the mountain, this depicted not as the single range or the mountains, but as the hundreds of mountains through the repetition of the basic linear form. A square, the mountain peaks emerging form immersed kind of the sea of the fox in the seemingly empty space. Both formally and conceptually, the San on this work shares the claim of the emptiness and the repetition found there. And even though the perceived initially the landscape, when the reader as the abstract, it shares the minimalist kind of the quality of the repeating of the single form. The foaming chip is a reformer of the calligraphy, morphing the millennium-old kind of tradition into the practice of the reflecting the contemporary life. He invented the scripts, many kind of different kind of scripts. He called in the different names, of which he say he has over 100 kind of the scripts he invented, including the sand script created by the blowing kind of dry ink, powder ink, the sand over on the characters written in only water, and the swirl kind of the script characterized by the looping lines, and the post Mariana, use Mariana script, which actually variable in the aesthetics, but often kind of including thick overlapping brushworks. In his needle script, showing here, as seen, the foaming chip considered the spatial kind of relationship between the character and the individual strokes, blurring the divided between the interior space of the characters. On the flight between the New York and the Asia, he kind of scrolled the poem that inspired his work. The Yang Jie-chang is the artist currently active in France and Germany. He not only used the Chinese characters, but also used the Western kind of the languages from his kind of the unorthodox calligraphies that the purposefully contain the mistakes and also aesthetic blunders. Liang Lambo Liang, and is now the works and also lived in works in Macau, and he actually worked quite a long time in the United States. In his painting, he synthesized the artistic kind of tradition, East and West, and traditional media and the digital technique. Through the digital art and the helps of the digital techniques, the 2D contemporary ink painting was transformed and became the multi-dimensional art in which the expressive power could be escalated and also expanded. His recent works bring this contemporary ink painting, digitalization, and the interactive installation. Also the theatricalization, video animations, and also the multimedia performance from 2D to 4D together. These kind of image might at the time remind the viewer the elemental kind of forces, the seething, the magma, and also the formation of the fossil, and the glacialization, also the solar flares. At the other times, they might seem this metaphoric of the invisible kind of dramas, cosmic and spiritual kind of the crisis, powerful emotions, recollected as the moments of the sincerity. We often see kind of the uncertainty and the confusions in the use of the calligraphic and the textual elements in the contemporary art, which actually leaves the great kind of potential and the space for the later artists to explore. And at the same time, another kind of important thing worth noticing is that regardless of their different kind of concepts, forms, and the methods, the artists all consciously or unconsciously associate the individual culture identity with the social experience, and also incorporate them into the construction of the contemporary visual culture. This required us to put the artworks back into the cultural studies and the supplement the traditional art history and the aesthetics studies with the personal experience and the observation of the social media. One key thing is to enhance and deepen our interpretation of the visual in this kind of its own cultural process. This process completes our visual experience. On this issue, J.T. Mitchell actually provided a great kind of the reference in visual studies, which can potentially benefit us. Perhaps we should actually not treat this kind of art involving the writing as the mere kind of visible and the readable subject or result. Rather, we are supposed to view this kind of the creative art as the process, a process in which the social and the cultural identity is being constructed. Or we may see it as the behavior or the happening and based on the incident itself. We can try to understand and search for its meaning. There are social constructions in the realm of the visual culture and the visual constructions in the realm of the social studies. Therefore, we should not only ask what do they mean or what are they for. Rather, it's the more kind of meaningful to ask what do they want to do, and what the question brought up by the works, what the discourse intended to evoke, and what does the function as the culture practice. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Professor Shen. First, we really appreciate you here and for your insightful lecture and all those wonderful images. I might need to introduce myself first before I, discuss anything further. My name is Ruth Shen, and I teach 中国书法 Chinese calligraphy in the LLC department at UF. For my class, I always start with very early of Chinese writing system and go through all the dynasty. one by one introduce all the masters. And of course, I will cover the modern Chinese calligraphy, and I start with Xu Bing, and I always end it with Xu Bing. Because once I started to introduce Xu Bing's, for example, the first exciting, the words from the sky, and then by introducing them about the square word calligraphy, and that's Xu Bing's famous writing school. He would alternate all the Western alphabet characters into the Chinese calligraphic writing by use the Chinese brush strokes and to create each English words in a square. So once you can, everybody can hear me? Okay. So once you figured out, that's just introduce you to understand the beauty of Chinese calligraphy, plus then you can read the sentence by just go through the alphabets. But anyway, I was trying to tell you is I didn't dare to go any further because students want to practice square word calligraphy so vigorously. So that's why I'm kind of hoping I'm not teaching this semester. I wish I was scheduled for teaching this semester. So your lecture will be so valuable to the class. But that kind of leads me to, I mean, your talk is very inspirational. I always wonder something, I think I have some answer, but I really want to learn more from you. Because you mentioned in the very beginning that the calligraphy and the painting, they're from the same roots. We like to say they're from the same family. And for calligraphers, sometimes we think they're the twins, but calligraphy is probably the brother and painting is, I mean, the older brother and the painting is the younger brother. Because all the painters all the traditional painters, they need to learn the calligraphic strokes first. So that we can trace all from the traditional paintings. And it's I'm kind of followed. I have to say myself, it's very traditional type of calligrapher, even though I dare to say I'm even a calligrapher, just love to write. But I'm, the reason I kind of stopped, don't want to get any further on the contemporary because I'm kind of think the tongue calligraphy is the real standard, and I hope my students all stick with the tongue, Yan Zhenqing and Liu Gongquan and so on. But my question is related with I think the modern Chinese calligraphy. Going through this trend, and in fact, the modern calligraphy kind of flourished very quickly. I wonder, is there something to do with the interest of the collectors, on the Chinese calligraphy? Because we can trace back, for paintings, Chinese painting was being, very widely collected century ago. And then in Western collectors, even probably try to eliminate the paintings with a lot of colophones, means the writings, because they just want paintings, nothing to do with calligraphy. So calligraphy wasn't any field being paying attention, even though Chinese painting was, very flourishing, and a lot of scholars study it, a lot of collectors buying it, vigorously. But calligraphy wasn't being any interest until actually we could say earlier to late 1960, and maybe Eliot collection, and then in fact not until the first calligraphy exhibition in the Met, I think it was at the Met, of the catalog is embodied image that was published in 1999. So once that exhibition was in New York, and for example, New York Times would say, wow, they studied the Chinese, they discovered the Chinese calligraphy. For example, they mentioned about Huang Tingjian's writing. It's three-dimensional. It's related with music and dance. So all of a sudden, people interested in Chinese calligraphy, and then the scholars, in the catalog, Fang Wen kind of said, in fact, the artist's spirit and in writing is nothing to do with characters. It's all just the spirit of the calligraphy carried through the brush and expressed on the paper, and so that as you can easily related the calligraphy and the painting and so on. So since then, I would say maybe the collector's interest influenced the modern calligraphy in the trend of development. So like all the pictures we've seen, the calligraphers seems like modern calligraphers or artists, they always applied the beauty of Chinese brushwork. But in fact, there are some, just go through the trend of Chinese writing itself. It's beautiful. Chinese writing, as you mentioned, based on the ideographic and pictographic concepts. So, and I'm trying to say is the collector's interest of recent years has a lot to do with this art of modern art development and in this particular area. Sorry, I carried a little bit over.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for comments. It's definitely true. I think for the collectors, it's very important to kind of let them understand why and how this artworks created. I think the kind of education is very important. That's why I think your work is very important to kind of train the students have to know what is really called calligraphy, what does calligraphy mean. So I think this, especially for the collection, it's really the beauty on the interest of the collectors. So how to help the collector to switch their interest into calligraphy actually is quite challenging, because especially Chinese calligraphy. And only in the Great Chinese Circle, people use the Chinese language they have the better understanding of this calligraphy. But for the other culture, people in other cultures, it's not very easy. We know the Chinese language itself is not very easy. And the Chinese calligraphy is directly linked to the language. So I think although in the modern, just in my talk, I pointed out in the contemporary period, this calligraphy itself is facing a big challenge, because not many people even write anymore, right? The younger generation, they possibly only sign the name, it's writing. Otherwise, they never write. They just type on the keyboard. So the calligraphy definitely will be kind of challenging. That's why you see the artists they're trying the all different way how to continue on the essence of this calligraphy as one of the essence of Chinese culture, continue this kind of essence of Chinese culture through the calligraphic kind of writing, or calligraphic, even we say the calligraphic kind of spread in their the art in different media, different kind of format. This is possibly the one way, but also like you did a very kind of the important, the basic kind of the training for the people to understand the Chinese calligraphy, the original Chinese calligraphy. I think it's still it's extremely meaningful. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful lecture. And I was really struck by that shoot. Sorry.
Okay. They have the recording.
Oh, they're recording. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you again for the lecture. And I was so struck by Xu Bing's work, and especially the fact that he returned to using characters with meaning. And I was so struck by the work, especially the little pieces of grass, the grass characters and the bird characters. And it reminded me of the story, you know, that the characters that Kang Jie made the characters by looking at nature and incorporating the shapes of nature into the characters. And then we see this artist who abandoned that, returned to the meaning, and now the work are actually three-dimensional objects that we are now appreciating like that, as if they were natural objects. And I wonder if that kind of artistic commentary would be possible in a script that was not pictographic.
Yeah, you know, Xu Bing's work, I think that he is the artist, I think that one of the most thoughtful artists in China. He always, main kind of the things that he always trying to challenge people's conception of viewing things. And start from the early, this book from heaven, and it looks like the complicated Chinese characters, but actually meaningless because he intentionally makes them meaningless. That time, of course, have the certain kind of the historical background at that time. But later, after he came to the United States, facing the challenge of the different culture and the different language, then he actually, to the final, make this so-called square characters that looks the Chinese character structure, but with English words inside. In between, also have several steps. He moved to this final. This is the challenge. The purpose I asked him, he will challenge people's perception too, because this so-called English calligraphy, it looks like the Chinese characters. All the people within this kind of East Asian cultural background, from far away, look at this, immediately thought, oh, this is some kind of characters I'm supposed to understand. But when they close to look at it, they find you cannot read it. It's not a character, not a Chinese, not Japanese, not Korean. So but for the people in the totally different English background, they look at it far away, they immediately, don't pay attention because some kind of language, definitely nothing deal with them. Looks like the Asian language. But when they close up, they find the tricky way you can read actually every character English words. He just uses to challenge the people's perception. I think this here, the landscapes also that go to another kind of steps. These kind of natural elements actually looks in his painting called the writing landscape, looks like the landscape, the natural elements, but actually it's all the characters. The way how to viewing things, then through the process, you get the different things. So I think that although, you're interested in this three-dimensional, it's a kind of another step he made, yeah.
Thank you. So I saw that so much of it is in black and white, and you mentioned that that's yin and yang. And I saw that some of the artists introduce color, but primarily it seemed it's in black and white. Can you speak a little bit more about use of color or not?
Yeah, because Chinese calligraphy originally used the same kind of materials and tools as the early Chinese painting. Basically use ink, brush, on paper, on silk. So the writing itself actually always use ink. You're not necessarily use any kind of color for writing, although sometimes they do use, occasionally use some kind of color for writing. But most of the writing, no matter what, is black. And even the printed words is also printed as black and usually on the white paper. So that's why the artist mainly is use and ink is black, this color for their most of the artworks. So and also the only use the black or the different tones of black ink. This is also the kind of related to the Chinese kind of literary kind of concept, because in the literary painting you will see the Chinese literary artists also emphasize on using this kind of only use this black. It's a different tones of black, different tones of gray, I should say, because they believe this different tones of black can represent the entire nature without any kind of colors. And also this concept possibly developed based on their kind of literary artist. They look down the kind of core painter. They believe the core painter used kind of very colorful kind of pigments there as simply trying to pleasure people's the visual enjoyment. But they think this is vulgar. It's not the kind of spirit of the literati they want to seek for. That's why traditionally you see Chinese ink paintings. Also, most of the landscape painting they are in black and white. Even this kind of birds and flower painting, they're supposed to have colorful kind of birds and flower painting. Also use the black, use the different tones of black. But recently, you can see the artists also start to use kind of different kind of colors in their work, although not too many. But they because this concept of the writing itself is also expanded, and the calligraphy itself, from the original just the use of functional, the now expanded to the more kind of this as a part of the visual enjoyment. So bring the color into their practice. I don't know if I answered the question or not.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
So, Professor, I think my question would be in China, Japan, and Korean, especially Korean, what their reception of this modern calligraphy? Because particularly Japanese still use kanji, but Korean from very early on, their calligraphy use Hangul. It's already kind of abstract line form. So is in East Asia, the different countries have a different reception of this modern calligraphy?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, actually, the modern calligraphy is a start from Japan, and in the 1960s. So as you pointed on this writing, since the Japanese started use their kind of the kana, and the different from the Chinese kanji, but there's still more than 1,800 kanji still used in the contemporary, the Japanese in the current life. So the calligraphy, I think when the modernist kind of the calligrapher in the 1960s, they're trying to challenge this. I think it's associated with this new kind of the 1960s, 70s, the new kind of development of the new technology inputted in the people's writing system. So they also associated with kind of this new postmodern concept, the deconstructed kind of concept there. So it's trying to deconstruct this kind of characters, use this simple kind of strokes or the certain components of the characters to deal with not only the Chinese kanji in Japanese, but also the Japanese their own kana. So this is the same kind of idea. I think we should say associated with the kind of current current kind of artistic development with the deconstruction and the postmodern concept. And in Korea, I also saw not too many compared to because the modern calligraphy movement is initially in Japan and echoed in China in 1980s or 90s. But in Korea, recently, yeah, I went to Korea quite often. I saw also had quite a group of the artists and actually followed this kind of trends start from quite early. In the 70s, 80s, already see the Korean artists. But many of them possibly they study in Japan, strongly influenced by this Japanese kind of modernist attempts.
Thank you, Professor Shen, for showing us the very interesting examples of modern artworks. I think in my view, traditional calligraphy vibrate between artistry and the utility, right? As a script of written language and as ideographic. And now today we have, on the one hand, we have the modernist or postmodernist calligraphic works as artworks. On the other hand, another thing is actually the traditional calligraphy was closely associated with the literatis, as you mentioned, literatis life and their cultural practice. And this kind of practice and this kind of understanding of calligraphy permeated the entire society. In today, on the one hand, as I just mentioned, we have modernist and postmodernist artwork, calligraphy artworks. On the other hand, Chinese intellectuals, university professors, cultural workers, and government officials, we can say they are modern literati. Okay, modern literati. They still practice traditional calligraphy or show off their handling of calligraphy, and from their work to from their practice through through religious rituals, that those priests still use calligraphy for their petitions to God, and to the ordinary Chinese, their celebration of Chinese New Year using scrolls of corporates still use calligraphy. So we see now the division between this artist work and non-artist work. So I would like to know your opinion of those calligraphy written by non-artist practitioners, or can we see this professional, this artist work, can we classify them if we follow the traditional literati theory? Can we see them, these artists represent by the works they just showed us, can we see classify them as professional artists, while other, say, modern literati, their work as amateur work, amateur artists? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is quite a complicated question, and actually, I don't know, can clearly classify this kind of two groups very strictly, because here, of course, that here as showing this artist, the practice calligraphy, they are intentionally, most of them, they actually originally is a very good, well-known calligrapher themselves. They can write the traditional calligraphy very well, and I can tell here. But they trying to see this kind of the challenge of the calligraphy in the modern society and the contemporary world. So they trying to find the way how to push this calligraphy the further in make the calligraphy suitable to the modern society in many ways. But also, as you pointed out, many people still practice calligraphy, right? And this is not the artists; they are just use the calligraphy practically, or have the interest to this kind of original elite kind of style of calligraphy, preached as the traditional part of the traditional art with the traditional painting same way. So to continue push that way, we say this, no matter the famous kind of ancient calligrapher's name, is still very big in Chinese culture. And to follow this way to practice calligraphy, it's kind of practiced by many people in the society. So these two things, I think, will be coexisting. I think until, although I say the practice calligraphy, definitely challenged by the new kind of lifestyle. But I think it will continue for a while, although I cannot predict how long they can continue. But I think that for a while we see with the Chinese kind of this culture itself existed. I think it will, along with this, continue for a while. But on the other hand, I think this group, the artists, they're trying to find their own way to find the new path for the calligraphy. Is also will be continued kind of the effort. So there's two things I think that, yeah, actually not so simple, the two things, but there's two kind of paths will certainly coexist for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That really you can see the Shuzhen himself, if you know him, he is a really good calligrapher in the traditional way. He actually writes calligraphy very well, and he's their head of the department of calligraphy. So this, especially like this kind of the people, they are very good at calligraphy and very the skill for all different kind of the style for the traditional calligraphy. They willing to try and willing to challenge themselves, also challenge the calligraphy itself too. So I think I think this is the kind of the creativity, right, for the artist. They not satisfied with whatever achievement they have, and the children. So if we follow the kind of the older tradition, he can be the still famous calligrapher writing the normal kind of calligraphy, but he just challenged himself. Yeah.
But can we say that the tradition of the Chinese calligraphy is so strong that even the new modern trend still see the trend is stronger?
My personal guess is that if you see the younger generations, now it become more and more obvious, and much less people involved in writing itself. This will be the big challenge, I think, for the so-called traditional calligraphy. This is no way to stop this. Younger generation actually not only not practice calligraphy, they actually, in some way, switch to the text-based culture to the visual-based culture. This is very obvious in this new generation we already see. So in this, general trends, how this development, I cannot predict it, but I will say the change is huge because the people's way of viewing nature, way of viewing the world changed. That's the basic change.
Amazing. Thank you so much for a really important lecture, so rich. There's so many questions. We're open till 9 tonight, so you can continue the conversation. But please join me in thanking Dr. Shen once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much.